Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Part 11 of Using the Power Platform to Extend Finance and Operations Apps, where today's topic is Industry Accelerators. My name is Evan, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this virtual event through Teams Live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation, and when you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the TechTalks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session, and we will use time at the end to address any further questions. Closed captions are available today in Spanish, French, German, Italian, Chinese, and Russian. To turn on closed captioning, click the CC button located on the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and to change languages, click the gear icon and select your choice. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now let's get started. Kicking us off today from Microsoft, we have Rachel Profit, Senior Fast Track Solution Architect. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Evan, and thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining from. I'm super excited for part 11. We're getting close to the end of our 12-part series. Today, we're really going to be focusing in on those industry accelerators, and I think this particular topic is very exciting to me because there's a lot of possibilities and ways that you can leverage these accelerators to really get the power of the Power Platform through these model-driven apps and portals and so on, with your solutions, and the possibilities of extending these with finance and operations are really endless as well. So again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Profit. I am a fast track solution architect based out of Denver, Colorado in the United States. My contact information is here on the screen, and I invite you to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and you can check out my blog at dynamics365lady.com. Taking a look at the objectives for our Tech Talk today, I want to introduce you to the concept of industry accelerators. And by the end of this, you should be able to describe use cases for using those industry accelerators with your finance and operations data. Also going to demonstrate how to install an industry accelerator so that you should be able to go off and install your own industry accelerator in one of your environments. We'll also take a look at demonstration of some of the industry accelerators. We won't have enough time to look at all of them, but we will be taking a look at 3 of them today. We're also going to demonstrate how you can use virtual entities with an industry accelerator. We'll wrap up with some do's and don'ts for using those industry accelerators with your finance and operations apps. Some things that we won't be covering in today's Tech Talk include the detailed licensing aspects, but I will point out to you that industry accelerators are free. You can download and install those industry accelerators free of charge. However, you do have to have the supporting licenses for the Dataverse, any model-driven apps or Canvas apps or Power Apps portals, for example, that are used in that particular accelerator. We won't be talking about detailed aspects of Power Apps, Power Automate, or even Power Apps portals in today's session, but these were 2 topics that we covered earlier in our series. And if that's of interest to you, I do invite you to go check out those recordings, which are available on the Tech Talk Community Dynamics page. We also won't be covering detailed aspects of dual write or virtual entities, although we will be talking about it a little, and you'll see a demo with virtual entities today. If you are interested in learning more and deep diving into dual write or virtual entities, there are separate Tech Talks that dive into these topics very specifically. They're not part of this Extending Power Platform series, but those Tech Talks are available on the same Tech Talk Community Dynamics page as well. So the flow of today's session, we're going to start with the introduction, and then we'll switch gears and talk about the use cases. I'll show you how to install an industry accelerator and do a demonstration of 3 industry accelerators. Then I'll show you how to extend your industry accelerator with virtual entities. We'll do the do's and don'ts, and we'll wrap up with some resources. So with that, let's just dive right in and take a look at what are industry accelerators. The Dataverse enables horizontal consistency for customers' business data, making it easier for you to create value from your data. However, many customers and partners want solutions and platforms that are tailored for their industry. So Microsoft has been working closely with representatives from various industries to make the Dataverse more relevant to these organizations by creating industry accelerators. Industry accelerators are foundational components within the Microsoft Power Platform and Dynamics 365, and they enable ISVs and other solution providers to quickly build vertical solutions. The accelerators extend the Dataverse to include new entities to support a data schema for concepts within specific industries. Microsoft is currently focused on delivering accelerators for the following industries, with more to come in the future. First, we have the automotive industry. Next, we have financial services, and this includes both banking and insurance. In the education industry, we have solutions that support both higher education and K through 12. We have the nonprofit industry, manufacturing, and media and entertainment industries as well. The Microsoft Power Platform and industry accelerators create a unique opportunity for ISVs to provide solutions for different scenarios and levels of development. This image shows the opportunities for ISVs who build on top of the platform and the industry accelerators. As the image shows, ISVs have multiple opportunities to deliver industry-focused applications and solutions. These opportunities exist whether you're building directly on Power Apps in the Dataverse or on top of Dynamics 365 applications in the Dataverse. Each level further expands the opportunities at the next level above. The accelerators provide opportunities to rapidly build vertical industry-focused apps, in addition to enabling system integrators to help scale and support these new apps and solutions. It's important to note that there are no out-of-the-box integrations with finance and operation apps and the industry accelerators. If you're in one of these industries or have customers in one of these industries, these accelerators can make it easier to develop solutions quickly. Instead of creating custom entities, tables, forms, and so on in finance and operations apps using X++, you can consider leveraging these accelerators for their data models and then build solutions and apps on top of it. You can use dual write, the data integrator, or virtual entities to help get data into or out of finance and operations where you need to use that data. So now that we kind of understand what an industry accelerator is, I want to switch gears and talk about the industry accelerator use cases. We're going to start with the higher education industry accelerator, which is part of the education industry accelerator. On the left here, you can see a screenshot of just one of the many screens that are available in the higher education model-driven app, or the Higher Ed Hub, as it's referred to. On the right-hand side, you can see that I've outlined some core entities and some extension opportunities. Now, the entities here are split up between core and higher education. This is by no means an exhaustive list of all of the entities that you get with the Dataverse and the Higher Education Industry Accelerator, but it includes things like course history, programs, student status, and so on. The core entities are available in both the higher education and the K through 12 accelerator. But then there are some additional entities that are available specific to higher education. And this includes things to help support grant management and program management. When we start thinking about how we might use the Higher Education Industry Accelerator with finance and operations, there are a number of different ways that this could be leveraged. For example, you might dual write the grant information over to grants in the project management and accounting module and dual write the programs over as projects. You could also dual write the accounts. So in the higher education industry, the account entity really represents things like students, faculty, and so on. But those students are likely paying tuition fees and so on as a part of their engagement with your organization. And so you can create those accounts in finance and operations as customers so that you can start to track those details, and you don't need to do the double entry of that account information. You might also auto-create projects with a flow when a student status, registration status, or program updates are happening inside of the model-driven app. You could also dual write courses to products. So courses are the things that you're selling, like that you have tuition fees related to, and there might be other types of products as well. But these are one of the key types of products that you sell in a higher education type industry. So you could dual write those over to the products entity in finance and operations. This would enable you to then sell those products either through a sales order or through project transactions like an item transaction. You could also create project transactions automatically. So when a student registers for a course, they might do that online through a portal, or it could happen directly through the higher education model-driven app, but we could dual write those over. You could also use virtual entities to show billing information and invoice information and payment information, for example, that is happening in finance and operations, and display that out in both the model-driven app and in the student portal. The Higher Education Industry Accelerator does include a sample portal for students, and we can enable displaying that additional information from finance and operations in that portal. Again, this is by no means an extensive or an exhaustive list of all of the different types of things that you could do, but hopefully it gets you thinking about what might be possible. You'll notice at the bottom of the slide, we do have a link here where you can learn more information and get a full list of all of the different apps and entities that are available with the Higher Education Accelerator. Next, we have the K12 Industry Accelerator. So this accelerator is kind of a sister accelerator to the higher education. It is possible for both the higher education and K through 12 industry accelerator to coexist. So if you're an organization that kind of manages both of those things, these can coexist, but there are separate apps that are specific to each one, as well as some separate entities to help support, but there's a lot of crossover between them as well. All of the same core entities exist, but we also have a lot of additional K through 12 entities that include things like attendance, education content, behavior incidents, interventions, assessments, and so on. When we start thinking about how we might extend this accelerator to work with finance and operations, again, there's a variety of things that we can do. One of the things that exists with this is a Canvas app, and you can actually see a sample of that on the lower right-hand side on the screen here, is a Canvas app that helps with doing donations. And so if you're using the donation functionality, you could dual write those donations back to finance and operations to post and track the financial details. You could also create projects for programs and dual write those donations to the funds for a project. So oftentimes when those donations are made, they're going to fund the different projects and programs that you are putting in place, whether they're extracurricular programs or different types of scholarships or whatever it might be that those donations feed into. Another example is that you could extend the parent-student portal. So on the right-hand side at the top, you can actually see a sample of the parent student portal sample that's provided out of the box. It includes things like homework, grades, and attendance in the sample app. However, you could extend this with virtual entities and allow people, parents, for example, to pay for book fees and other expenses that you're recording back in finance and operations. You could also use virtual entities to display past payment and invoice information out in that same portal or in the model-driven app in the Student 360 view, for example. Again, we have a link at the bottom here where you can see the additional information about this accelerator. Next up, we have the Nonprofit Industry Accelerator. So on the left-hand side, you can see a sample of a dashboard here that's centered around households. And households is one of the concepts that you can track and enter details into the model-driven app. There are a lot of additional entities around transactions, awards, disbursements. There's also a delivery framework, which is actually a separate model-driven app, or you can get access to that through the nonprofit hub as well. There are apps that are specific to fundraising and volunteer management as a part of this nonprofit accelerator. When we start thinking about how we might extend and use the nonprofit industry accelerator with finance and operations, we can do things like dual writing those disbursements to finance and operations and post those payments and get the GL and financial aspects of that disbursement tracked in your financial system. We might also enable virtual entities to surface credit and collections data. So there's a concept of like memberships, for example, and people might have like monthly payments that they're making to you. So you could surface that credit and collections information so you know who's made their payments and who you might need to follow up with about their payments or get new credit card information or whatever, however they might be paying. You could also dual write fundraising data to post transactions inside of finance and operations. This could be a lot of different things. Again, that money that has been fundraised might go into an actual fund that supports a project, but it might also just be a transaction and you need to record that revenue or that income in your general ledger. So that could, depending on the type of fundraiser event that you're hosting, that could be directly through a GL journal, or it might be through like a free text invoice so that you have a way to provide a receipt to someone as well. You might also enable virtual entities for invoices that have been processed from fundraising. And there's several places that have budgeting capabilities built into the industry accelerator related to like awards and the delivery framework and a few other places as an example. But that budgeting information could be dual written over to the budgeting module inside of finance and operations. Or if you're a project driven organization, it could be dual written over to the project budgets as well. Again, by no means an exhaustive list of all the things that you could do, but hopefully this gets your brains flowing and gives you some ideas of the types of things that you might be able to do with this accelerator. Moving on is the Manufacturing Industry Accelerator. We highlighted this accelerator in a couple of our previous sessions, so we did touch on this inside of our Common Data Service, or now it's called the Dataverse, but that was part 2. We also talked about this a little bit in our portals session earlier in the series. So some examples of some entities that you might see in the Manufacturing Accelerator include the accounts, contacts, access requests, capabilities, and so on. The Manufacturing Industry Accelerator is probably one of the easiest ones to connect the dots, I think, with finance and operations, because we have an entire production control module that is all centered around manufacturing. And manufacturing is one of the industries that finance and operations really focuses in on. So there's a lot of possibilities here in terms of what you could do. With the base functionalities that are available out of the box, there's a number of things that we might dual write. So for example, we might manage the whole onboarding process and application process for vendors. And once they're approved, we might dual write those over into finance and operations so that they're now actual vendors in the system and we can start capturing purchase orders and invoices and payments. We might also dual write the vendor capabilities that you can capture in the model-driven app to procurement categories. So we have this concept in finance and operations where you can link in procurement categories, which indicates the types of products that a vendor can supply to you. And there's a lot of downstream functionality in finance and operations that you can use around like vendor search, for example, with those procurement categories. There's also a concept of certifications on the vendor accounts in finance and operations. So you might dual write those certifications that are being uploaded through the portal or entered in directly through the model-driven app into finance and operations. So you can use that information to determine in workflows and downstream processes if a vendor has the proper certifications in place in order to place a purchase order or to get services from that vendor, for example. Some ways that you might extend the model-driven app and the portal that already exists is using virtual entities to take information in finance and operations, such as payment information or invoice information, for example, and displaying that out in the model-driven app or in the supplier portal. We also could allow, use those virtual entities to allow your vendors to actually submit invoices through the portal. Another example is you could use the virtual entities to display RFQ information, request for quotation information, and allow bidding on the portal. Now, you may be familiar with the fact that we do have a vendor collaboration portal that's part of finance and operations. You could simply just extend the existing portal by using iframes to take the out-of-the-box vendor collaboration pages for RFQs and so on, and embedding them into this portal so you get the best of both worlds without the need to develop new pages or extend that portal beyond just embedding an iframe, for example. But if you want a similar look and feel or specific branding, or you want to extend that functionality, you could absolutely build that functionality out directly in the portal. There's a link again here at the bottom of the page to the Manufacturing Accelerator. I encourage you to check this out if this is an industry of interest. Next up, we have the Automotive Industry Accelerator. So the Automotive Industry Accelerator is not really focused around automotive in terms of manufacturing. This is automotive in terms of like dealerships, like a car dealership or an RV dealership or so on. In the entities, you'll notice we don't actually have an entity called car. It's actually referred to as devices. So devices could be anything. It could be a car, it could be a golf cart, it could be an RV, it could be a tractor, it could be really anything that's automotive. And we have the ability to kind of track all of the detailed information related to those vehicles, including the kind of sales process, which is oftentimes referred to as a deal. So you can create deals, files, and terms. There's also an ability to track trade-ins, manage services and warranties, and a lot more. That's a part of those core entities that come out of the box with the Automotive Accelerator. So some things that you might do to extend and use the Automotive Industry Accelerator with finance and operations include starting out with dual writing your devices, like cars, for example, over to your inventory. You might also link those over to asset management, and there's integration out of the box with the accelerator with field service as well. If some of your vehicles or autos that are in your stock are actually fixed assets, you could record those as assets, or if they're being leased as well, you could dual write those over into asset leasing. You could also dual write your service orders and post transactions and invoices inside of finance and operations to record the financial and inventory aspects of your service shop at your dealership, from the service appointments and contracts and so on that are happening inside of the model-driven app. You could use virtual entities from finance and operations to display invoices and payment information in the customer 360 view. There's also the ability that you could dual write the sales that are happening. So when deals happen, you could dual write those sales into finance and operations, post those invoices and generate general ledger entries. And you could even display those invoices back, or dual write those invoices back, or virtual entities for those back into the Automotive Accelerator and display those in your model-driven app. So the last industry accelerator is the Media and Entertainment Industry Accelerator. Again, this particular one has, I think there's about like 6 or 7 different apps. You'll actually see a demonstration of this one a little bit later, but there's kind of a couple different areas that it focuses in on. We have guests and guest management. We have event management, we have sports management, we also have media and ad sales management. So there's a number of different things that we can do in entities to support all the different types of media and entertainment and industry type use cases. So from extension opportunities, how you might use this with finance and operations is we might use dual write to synchronize your sales. This could be sales from either ticketing, so there's a ticketing management app, or from your media advertising application. If you're using both, obviously you could dual write both of those over. You could also dual write to synchronize your guest information to customers. So if you're using the guest management applications to manage guests, you dual write that information over, including like loyalty information. If you're using commerce, for example, and you have a loyalty program and people, might be using, you might be using the point of sale, for example, to sell tickets or pick up tickets, things like that at your venues. You might also use dual write to sync the various different venues, facilities, and different media type devices that you've tracked in your system over to the fixed assets module so that you can track those assets and depreciate them. You might also use dual write to sync events to the projects module and create transactions. So if you're a project driven organization in your events, you want to capture all those costs and revenues together, you might use projects and create transactions as they're posted. You might also use virtual entities to expose that invoice and payment information out to a portal. So for your guests, if they're buying tickets or registering for events and so on, you could expose that information out to a portal where they can see that information from finance and operations. You might also use it, like I said, to expose that payment information and allow people to make payments directly on your portal. We've got a link at the bottom again where you can learn more about the Media and Communications Accelerator. So at this point, what I want to do is switch gears a little bit and take a look at how to install an industry accelerator. So in this example, I'm actually installing the Automotive Industry Accelerator. So I'm here in the Power Platform Admin Center, and I'm going to select a CDS environment. So once I select that environment, I click on the Dynamics 365 apps on the right, and then I'll click on Open App Source at the top of the page. This will take a minute to load the App Source website. It'll open in a new tab on your browser. Once this loads up, I will search for the Automotive Industry Accelerator. The process and the exact steps for each of the accelerators, the general process is exactly the same. There might be slightly different options that you'll select when you install this, but it's a pretty similar process. So here I'm searching for the Automotive Accelerator, and then I'll click on it, Dynamics 365 Automotive Accelerator, and I click refresh on the page because there's something wrong with it. And then we click Get It Now. I agree to the terms and click Continue. And this will, again, take me back to the Power Platform Admin Center. This will take a second here to load as well, and I'll need to select which environment I want to install this accelerator in. So while this is loading here, I'll just point out too that like I said, all of these industry accelerators, similar process. You can install multiple accelerators in the same environment and have multiple apps that are available. But once you select the environment where you want to install it, you'll accept those terms again and then click Install. And this will bring you to a new page where it will you'll choose which options you want to install. So in this example, I'm just going to select some of the options, but not all of the options. You can always come back later and install the other components. So the Automotive Accelerator has components that work on top of Dynamics 365 Sales, but you have to have Dynamics 365 Sales installed first, otherwise the installation of those components would fail. If you later decide you want to add sales and add those in, you just repeat the process and just mark those checkboxes next time. So once we go back and we refresh the page, you'll be able to see that Automotive Accelerator here. You can see it's the second row there, and the status is installing. Depending on how many options you choose to install, the amount of time that it takes to install can vary. On the short end, some of them take around like 30 minutes. On the longer end, some of them can take as much as like 3 to 4 hours. When you choose to install demo data packages, it does typically take longer. So, just keep that in mind. Those demo data packages take a little bit longer to install. All right, so now that we've seen how to install an industry accelerator, I'm going to do a couple demonstrations for you and showcase some of the out-of-the-box industry accelerators. So I've chosen 3 of them for today's presentation. The first one is the Education Accelerator. So I'm here in the higher ed, and I've opened up the Contoso University that we've created, and you can see we have the ability to track lots of details about this, including basic information, interns, scholarships, and so on. I can quickly and easily add new scholarships directly from these pages. So in this example here, you can see that I'm adding a new scholarship for athletic excellence. Related to soccer, I can put in the amount information, the type of scholarship that this is, and put in lots of additional details. Obviously, I didn't put all the details in, but I do have that ability to do that. If we take a look at the contact page, this is where I can keep track of all of my students, faculty, and so on. So here I'm just going to go create myself as a student. So I'll put in my contact information and I'll select what type of contact I am. But you can see here that we can track alumni, faculty, guests, instructors, parents, students, and so on. So there's a lot of detailed information that can be tracked here on the general contact when you create it that's specific to the education industry. And then we also have the ability to put in some additional information like student details. So here I'm going to add in some areas of study and some areas of interest. So I'll add some existing ones. I'll just pick a few here and then click add. And I'll do the same thing for interests. You get to define your list of studies and areas of interest. So I'm just picking a few things that exist in this list out of the box. And then I'll click add. I also have the ability to create timelines related, academic periods, course histories, test scores, apply for internships and scholarships directly through these pages in the model-driven app as well. So you can see here, I'm going to apply for an internship. So I can choose which one I want, enter in a name. I can put in all of the dates and details about this. And save that information. You'll notice that this has a business process flow linked to it as well, that you can customize, that workflow and that business process flow that, goes along with your process. You'll notice that we have the ability to track details about the various courses that you're offering, programs, and so on, where you can put in all the details. So that's the courses page. Here we've got the programs page where I can put in the different programs, extracurricular activities, areas of study, and so on. Down at the bottom, we've got those intern scholarships and grants as well. And I can come out here and very quickly and easily create a new app. You'll also notice if I go back to the Maker portal that there's also a variety of additional apps that come with the Education Industry Accelerator, including a grants app. And for the K through 12, we've also got apps that are specific to behavior management and an attendance app. And there's two versions of the attendance app. One is a tablet app and one is a mobile device app that can work on like a cell phone, for example. So a lot of functionality that you get with this out of the box. There's also some portals that come with this where you can deploy the parent-student portal as a part of that industry accelerator. Next up, we have the nonprofit accelerator. So with the nonprofit accelerator, there's a variety of different pages that all link to accounts, which give us and contacts that give us the ability to keep track of different individuals. And you can keep track of all of their contact information. You can keep track of donors, households where you can kind of group multiple contacts together and indicate, what those volunteers are, put in some additional details about the type of account that it is. The accounts page gives you a view of all of them. I'll come back to it here in a second and change the view so you can see. I'll do accounts that have no campaign activities in the last 3 months. So there's lots of different views of that. Going down, we've got a bunch of functionality that's specific to fundraising. So we have the ability to track those donor commitments and information related to that and record transactions. So again, these transactions might be written over as free text invoices, for example, into finance and operations to record the GL aspects. You can also track planned giving and create memberships. But when you're doing planned giving, you can indicate here the details if it's coming from a trust, the giving information, insurance information, and deceased information if it's from someone who donated money after they were deceased, for example. Memberships and designations, there's a lot of additional information that you can track in here. As we keep going down, the next section is all the awards management. So you can keep track of all the different objectives that you're going to be giving awards related to. So in this example, it's economic opportunity. You can have budgets related to these, and these could be synced over to finance and operations. We talked a little bit about that. We've also got the ability to make recommendations for awards to different people and requests for different types of objectives that you might have out there. You can actually set up the individual awards themselves, create reviews, reports, disbursements, and then there's a dashboard as well. The next section is the delivery framework, and I'm actually going to switch to the delivery framework app. If you're in the nonprofit hub, you can see all of this, but if we switch to the delivery hub, it kind of gives a simplified view that's just around delivery framework. So this allows us to keep track of all the different engagements that we have going on, the different item requests. So if you've got like a hurricane management and you're handing out bottles of water or food, right, you can document and detail all of that and create programs and projects to manage this, create budgets related to the information. And then you can also track the results of your delivery framework as well. So as you're giving those things out, you can track, who you're providing those services or products to as a part of your particular program. You can create indicators and indicator values that you're using to track in those results. And then there's a dashboard to see the details about how your delivery framework is working. Also notice at the bottom that we've got the ability to set up all those different items, requests, groups, and types as well, which could be dual written over to finance and operations. And the last one we're going to take a look at today is the Media and Entertainment Accelerator. So this is broken down into a couple different apps. So the first one that we're looking at here is Event and Venue Management. So we have the ability to keep track of all those different media events. The example you're seeing here is like Microsoft Build 2021, but this could be sporting type events as well. It doesn't have to be conference type events. It could really be any type of event that you're hosting. We also have event attractions. So if there's different attractions that are happening at the event, in the example here of Microsoft Build, like we're tracking each of the different keynotes and each of the different breakout sessions and so on, and linking that information in, indicating the facility and the location, what room it's in, the type of session, so on and so forth. You can also make attraction schedules. And I actually forgot to fill in one of the required fields here for the attraction, so I need to link that in and indicate that this was a keynote. So then I can actually save it and start to build out my attraction schedules and indicate what time this is going to happen. If you've got sessions that are repeating, you can kind of make the same attraction have multiple times. And then as people start to register, we can keep track of that. And there's portals to help support all of this. We can also keep track of the talent. In this case, I'm creating Alyssa Taylor, who's my keynote speaker. But if you're managing a sporting event like the Super Bowl, for example, you would put in talent here to track, who's doing your halftime show, who's singing the national anthem at the beginning, and so on. Those would be kind of what you would represent there with your talent. And then we also have the ability to keep track of all of the different media venues. So with the media venues, I've got like a theater here that I've set up, and it's got, some details, and I can create seat maps and so on, Wi-Fi information. I can upload images of it. I can drill into the details of the seat map, or if I open the seat map directly from the navigation pane, I can see all of the details of that seat map from here with pictures, and then drill into the seat map details, which takes a second to load here. But this is where I can indicate how many sections, rows, tiers, and so on, and you can actually kind of design out that seat map just how you want. And this allows you to surface that information so people can select seats on your website when they're buying tickets if you're using the ticket management applications. So now we've switched gears, we're in the guest management app. So with the guest management app, we have the ability to keep track of all of our fans and guests. Again, these fans and guests might be purchasing things from you. They might be part of a loyalty program, for example. So you can keep track of all that loyalty program information, enroll people in those loyalty programs. And we might, again, dual write that information back to finance and operations. The next app that we're going to take a look at, this is the Media Product Sales and Ticketing app. So this app, a lot of the same pages, but here we have the ability to track those sales, quotes, orders, leads, and so on. This app is built on top of Dynamics 365 Sales, so you do have to have sales in order for all of this to work. But those out-of-the-box integrations for Dynamics 365 Sales to sync your orders and so on over to finance and operations would work here, but you'd need to extend it if there's any additional fields that are a part of the Media Product Sales and Ticketing app that you want to sync in addition to the standard fields that are part of the out-of-the-box integration with sales. But we have the ability to keep track of all those details and keep a whole history. Now we're taking a look at the sports management app, where I can manage your fantasy football team, or you can manage an actual sports team. So here we're managing the Ultimate Frisbee League that we have here at Microsoft. And you can see that we can split this up into teams, divisions, and conferences. And you can manage all of the different players. You can see that Satya is here on my Building 31 Flavors team, and you can put keep track of all the different events and have a complete player history as well. You can set up all the details about each of one of your players and manage all of the player information, all the conferences, divisions, seasons, and so on. So a lot of information you can manage there. And the last one here is the media and product display ad sales. So with this one, we have the ability to sell advertisements and different types of media. So you set up the products. These are the different types of medias that you're wanting to sell. And then you can create ad zones. So ad zones are the different areas that you might be having advertisements in. So if we think about a large stadium or any event center that you're using, there might be advertisements in lots of different spaces inside of the stadium, and so we can kind of indicate when those ads will occur. So these ad segments are indicating like we're looking at a halftime, but if you're running like TV advertisements or advertisements on scoreboards or things like that, you can keep track of that. So I have the ability to track your TMAs and where you're kind of blasting out those TV advertisements. And there's you'll notice that we've got a lot of the same events and venue information, but we have the ability to start linking those media advertisements and so on over to the events and venues that you're managing separately in the event and venue app. So a lot of flexibility in terms of the type of functionality that's available with these accelerators out of the box. So what I want to do now is switch gears again, and we're going to take a look at how to extend an industry accelerator. In the example that you're going to see here, we are using virtual entities, and I'm using the manufacturing industry accelerator for this example. So what you're going to see in the basic scenario that I'm doing is I'm exposing vendor invoices out to the model-driven app. It could also be extended out to the portal. We actually did a demo of that portion of it in our Power Apps portal session earlier. This is really just the portion of the demo where I'm enabling the virtual entities and building out the model-driven app for those pages. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. So I am in the supplier management model-driven app, and I click on that funnel icon to open up the advanced filter, and I need to search for the available finance and operations entity. And I'm going to look for invoice here, because I want to go find the vendor invoice. Now, I've already enabled the vendor invoice header entity, so you can see its status is set to visible yes. I'm going to scroll down and find the vendor invoice line entity and click on that, and we'll enable it. It'll take a few minutes for it to actually become visible in the Dataverse. So you'll have to, once you enable it, you close these windows down. And come back to your Power Apps Maker portal. So I'm here in the Maker portal and I'm on entities. It's now called tables. And I'm going to search for that vendor invoice header. So since I'd already enabled that one, it's already available. And I need to make some new views. When you enable a virtual entity, it creates views and forms and everything for you, but it typically just puts whatever the primary field is in your view. So you'll need to go update those views and forms to make them actually usable. So I'm just adding in some additional fields here that I want to display, and then I can rearrange the columns, add sorting. So I'm just kind of dragging and resizing. When I'm done, I click publish. Then I go back. And I'm going to do a similar process on the Forms tab to create a form. So I'm going to open up that main form. Again, it'll just have the one field in it, not super useful if you wanted to put this in an app. So I need to go add some additional fields. So again, I kind of repeat this process, clicking on all the fields that I want to include. Then I'll rearrange my fields, make them look the way I want them to look. I also have the ability to add additional components, layouts, and so on. We'll be coming back to this page after we've done the vendor invoice line to add in the lines grid. So now that we've created that, I can now go over to my vendor invoice line entity. It shows up now. I'm going to do a very similar process. So I'm going to make a view. So that primary field here, again, not super useful. I want to put in the fields that I want. And if I want to remove one, I just click on it and select remove. I add in all the different columns I want and rearrange the columns to look nice. So I'm just clicking on a bunch of different columns here, removing the stuff I don't want, and then I sequence the columns so that it looks nice. If I want to sort this, which I do, I sort this, you'll see here in a second here, I'll add the sorting on this and it will be sorted by the line number, and then I publish it. So I need to create the form now. So I create a form, much like I did on the previous one. It put a primary field on here. If I don't want that, I can just mark it as hide. Again, I'm going to go through that process of adding the fields that I want into the form. And once I have all the fields again, I'll rearrange them, make it look nice, get it the way I want. Just dragging and dropping the fields to the position. And once I've got all the fields that I want, I publish it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the vendor invoice header, right? So that header entity and go back into the form that we edited earlier. And I'm going to choose to add a subgrid. So I want to show the related records. So in this case, the only related record is the lines because it's the only virtual entity I've enabled. And I give it a nice label and a nice name. You can choose what you want that to look like, and we publish it. So now I've got the header and the lines here. I've got a nice looking form. So the next step in the process is to open up the actual model-driven app. So I'm opening up the supplier management model-driven app that comes with the Manufacturing Industry Accelerator. And I'm adding a new area here called vendor transactions. And then I'm going to add a sub area for the new page that I just created. So I choose the vendor invoice header entity. That's the one you saw me updating. Put a title on this, vendor invoices. When I'm done, I need to save it and publish it. Then I'll go back and validate this in my app designer. So there's my vendor invoice. If I wanted to limit that down to specific forms instead of all forms, I can do that. Again, I save and publish. Then I can hit play to actually see my app. So you'll scroll down, there's my transactions and my vendor invoices, the view that I created, and when I open it up, you see the details of that invoice. So this video, it was sped up. This video demo was about 6 minutes long, but in real life, it took about 15 to 20 minutes to create this from scratch, enabling those virtual entities and making these new forms. So as you can see, it's very easy to expose the information from finance and operations out to the Dataverse and then build your model-driven app on top of that very quickly and easily without any coding required. Obviously, you'll want to make sure that you set up security on these things appropriately so that people can't edit or make changes to it if you don't want them doing that. But if you want to allow that, obviously, we do support those basic CRUD operations in the portal. All right, so kind of wrapping up with some do's and don'ts and resources. If you've come to some of our earlier sessions, these do's and don'ts aren't really any different. We've talked about these before, but again, for those of you who may not be familiar, some things to keep in mind. When you're extending one of these industry accelerators, there's two basic ways to do it, and there's really three. You can also use the data integrator, but that's asynchronous and tends to be less commonly used for these types of scenarios. But dual write is one of those options and virtual entities is the other. So when you're using dual write with your industry accelerators, make sure that you use dual write to duplicate data. So you're going to copy that data from F&O into the Dataverse. And that data is expected by the business logic of both applications. You'll also want to consider the Dataverse API limits. So API limits still apply. And if you're really high transaction volume, you might need to kind of buy up some additional licenses around that. You also want to consider multiplexing and the order line skew. If you're creating orders over there and they're not licensed and you're dual writing over to from the model-driven app in the Dataverse over to finance and operations, and you're creating sales orders, for example, or purchase orders or whatever it might be, that is considered multiplexing, and you might need to purchase order line SKUs if those users are not also licensed to create sales orders or purchase orders or any of those transactions directly in finance and operations. You also want to consider the Dataverse database size and procure add-ons if necessary. With your finance and operations subscription, you're getting a Dataverse, provided to you out of the box, and it has, just like your F&O database has a certain amount of capacity that you get out of the box, the Dataverse is no different. Because you are dual writing, that Dataverse is going to grow. And so you need to make sure that you're watching the capacity of that and purchasing in the correct capacity if needed. Some things not to do with dual write is don't duplicate the data where business logic is only needed in one of the systems. You're better off to use virtual entities for that type of scenario. Also, don't use dual write where the business logic is going to be in like a Power App or Power Automate, for example. There's no need to duplicate that data again, right? You could use virtual entities and save yourself some capacity rather than duplicating all of that data. So when we think about do's and don'ts for virtual entities, you'll want to use virtual entities where your business logic resides in F&O. And when you plan to extend or add business logic in a Power App or Power Automate. You do want to make sure that you relate your virtual entities to each other inside of finance and operations when you're making those entities in the AOT, like through an extension. You'll also want to relate virtual entities to native entities with X++ extensions. Things not to do, don't use virtual entity as a data copy mechanism. That's not what it does. If you need to copy data for some reason, you're going to want to look at dual write or the data integrator, for example. You'll want to use virtual entities when additional, or don't use virtual entities when additional data point is needed. So if you expose a virtual entity for invoices, for example, or orders or whatever it might be out to the Dataverse and you want to build a model-driven app, you can't go into the Dataverse and add another column. That column should be added into finance and operations, and then it can be exposed out to the virtual entity. And don't try to relate one virtual entity to another virtual entity from directly inside of the Dataverse. So those are just some of the things to keep in mind when you're working with the virtual entities. You know, when we think about model-driven apps and Canvas apps and Power Automate, any of these additional components, Power Portals, all the do's and don'ts of those still apply. And I encourage you to check out the earlier videos in the series if you're interested in kind of what are some of the things that are specific to Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Portals, and so on in terms of those do's and don'ts. All right, so we're going to wrap up with a few resources. I've pulled together a variety of different links for you. So the first page of resources here is all of the industry accelerator resources. So you can find all of the documentation on the docs website, and there's also a blog where you can kind of track that blog and get additional information. All of the industry accelerators are available on AppSource and on GitHub. I will point out healthcare is listed here. The healthcare industry accelerator, they announced its deprecation back in November, and it will no longer be supported after, I believe, March of this year. So that's why I didn't highlight it. You know, if you have a need for it, you can technically still download it, but it won't be supported after March. So keep that in mind. When we think about dual write, I've also, you know, pulled together some of the additional information about dual write. So remembering, you know, dual write is tightly coupled near real-time bidirectional integration. And there's some links at the bottom of the page with the link directly to the dual write TechTalk, as well as the dual write homepage on the docs, and some information about application lifecycle management for dual write components. I've also pulled together a variety of resources and some basic information for you around virtual entities. And so keep this in mind. There is a frequently asked questions page on the docs website, as well as the virtual entities Yammer group, which are great resources to get your questions answered. So with that, we're going to open it up for Q&A. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but we do have like a minute or so. So I'll kind of leave it open in case you do have questions. But hopefully, you know, you can take away from this session some kind of key tips and tricks and things that we can do with these industry accelerators to make them work better with finance and operations. All right, since we don't have any questions, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it back over to Evan, who is going to do our survey and wrap us up for today. Evan?
Awesome, thank you, Rachel. Like Rachel said, I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future sessions, and we thank you for your participation in that. As a reminder, the recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. So this concludes today's broadcast. I'd like to extend a big thank you to Rachel and a thank you to our audience for logging in and joining us today. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.